3, 2, and 1. Welcome to the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, also a stream on expert CRE secrets, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy, such as the Deferred Sales Trust, is the best way to exit highly appreciated crypto businesses, real estate, have flexibility to buy back into real estate, eliminate any 1031 exchange so you can create and preserve more wealth, or help your clients, friends, and family do the same. Hey, I'm your host, Brett Swarts, and each episode I'm joined by some of the best real estate, financial, wealth, and leadership minds in the world, where they share their ideas, deal stories, and inspiration. So together we can make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. Hey, I'm excited about our next guest. He's calling out of the great state of Nevada, originally from Pennsylvania. And he's here to teach us a little bit more about the 3 pillars of wealth and how that can help you achieve what's called FIRE, financial independence, retire early. And he has a diverse background in real estate and financial planning as a realtor and building businesses and so much more. Please welcome to the show with me, Lucas Thomas. Lucas, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you, Brett.
For our listeners, get to know you for the first time, would you give us a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Okay, great. So I joined the Army. When I got out of the Army, I didn't want to have a boss. So when I was in college, my entire existence was, how do I never have a boss? And this is before the FIRE movement existed. But the reality is I wanted to figure out how to make my own money and have a retirement plan by the time I was in my early 30s, late 30s. And when I got started, I started as a copywriter. I wrote sales copy. I became a salesperson, and I found out sales is like the number one way to, get into real estate, mortgages, and financial planning. So I started in copywriting, and then one of my buddies said, "Hey, Luke, you know what you should really do is real estate. You can make 10 times the money at half the work." And I was like, "Oh, that's a great idea. Why don't I just do that? Because there's nothing better than making 10 times the money at half the work." So then I got my real estate license. And then, unlike most real estate agents, their story is they bought a house and they saw how much the real estate agent made, and that's how they got their license. I was on the other hand of this. I was, how do I buy something that makes cash flow? So I ended up buying some condos in low-income neighborhoods with all sorts of wonderful problems. I got so many stories now. And then once I bought that, I bought one more and then one more. And then I became a property manager for a living. And then I helped my clients buy rentals. And then as that grew, it grew into, people wanted absentee owner businesses. So then I started getting into helping my clients buy absentee owner businesses. And then it became, Luke, what about paper assets? And I'm like, there's crypto, stocks, bonds. And then pretty much I evolved with my clientele. And as my clientele wanted more stuff from me, I then had to go get, I had to start taking classes on financial planning. So pretty much I have my 25 main clients, and my evolution was as they grew their wealth, they had more questions, and therefore I had to grow my own wealth. And therefore I started learning and evolving with my clientele until now I got to where I am today.
Excellent. So what a cool background. That's amazing. I love it. Let's dive right into the topic at hand, which is, growing 3 pillars of wealth. So Lucas, what's the number one secret to growing 3 pillars of wealth? And what are the 3 pillars?
So the 3 pillars are paper assets, real estate assets, and businesses. My belief is, and this is an opinion, obviously, is that real estate is the number one asset. It's the base for pretty much building into all the other assets. Because real estate allows you, because it's an age-old business, it's easy to understand, it's got great tax benefits. You don't really have, you don't need a rocket science degree to figure out, buy a house, rent it, buy a house for cheap, sell it for more money than you bought it for. It's all really simple, it's all simple stuff, but it's just hard sometimes in the execution, and that's where people get bogged down. So those are the 3 pillars. But basically my philosophy is you start in the real estate, build a base, and then once that base gets you more wealthy, you grow more wealth, do some cash out refinances, because if you buy something for $100,000, then it goes up to $300,000. You pull out $250,000, you go buy 10 more of that thing. Or if you have money sitting around, that's when you go into paper assets. And your paper assets, that's going to be your crypto. I just assume all paper assets. It's money that sits somewhere and it appreciates or pays dividends. So that's going to be dividends or interest payments. So that's going to be your bonds, crypto, stock market, real estate notes. So if you get into seller finances and providing lending for other people, like I used to be in the mobile home industry, and I used to provide. I did a lot of seller financing because you can find markets that banks won't touch, and you can be the hard money lender on a lot of these things, which is a really good way to make money. But the problem with those is you have to have a big pile of money to get into those markets and those investments. So, then your last one's going to be businesses, which is a great way to make money. Problem is businesses have a 80% fail rate. And the problem with that is, why would you go immediately into businesses when you could go into real estate where it's simple? Buy a house, rent it, buy a house for cheap, sell it for more money than you bought it for. You're not reinventing any wheels. But with businesses, it's like, well, I'm going to come up with a new app. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to create this new amazing thing. And it's like, well, what happens if that doesn't work out? Mm-hmm. And because of that high risk, it's one of the top tier pillars, but you need that base to get into those tiers. So that's why when, in my worldview, paper assets is where you store your money when you're not using it. Your real estate's going to be your main driving force. And then once you get to a certain level of income and wealth, then you're allowed to get into business.
Got it. Wow, that's a ton of wisdom in a short period of time. So there's 3 pillars: there's real estate, there's paper assets, and there's businesses. And real estate would be the base, maybe the safest, most tried and true, and also has those tax benefits. So that's a good place to start. And then paper assets would be a good place to store it in between, maybe buying real estate deals or when you're just trying to save and build wealth to get to a point where you can buy a business, start a business. Is that a fair summary so far?
Yeah, exactly. And the reason I tier it like that is because some people, they want to jump a tier, and I'm like, unless you got like the next Google or the next Facebook or the next $1 billion idea, by all means pursue it. But for the vast majority of us, we got to start at the lower tiers. And that's one of my number one financial planning things I always train people on. I know what you want to do, but it's like, I equate it to taking, it's like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, as my old man used to say. You take one bite at a time, but if you take too big of a bite, you'll choke and die.
Got it. That's a good analogy. So how do you base those tiers? Is it a certain amount of recurring income per month or passive income per month? 50% of your expenses on the first thing, or 25%, 10%? Like, at what point are you buying more homes or buying more deals, or, walk us through into how you graduate between each tier?
It depends on where you come from. So obviously, if you're in a higher income bracket, you can jump tiers. If you're in the lowest income bracket, you gotta start at the very bottom. And the bottom is you have to house hack. So that means you gotta buy it. You have to get a down payment, use an FHA loan or a conventional loan, and you got to buy a fourplex because it's considered a residential investment. And then you got to live in it. And a lot of these multifamily places aren't in the greatest neighborhoods. And people are always like, well, I don't want to live in that neighborhood. It's just like, well, hey man, this is how wealth works. And I wish you're in a larger income bracket. But this is what I think about.
I think about, it's like, we growing up, dad had a lot of wealth. Mom didn't have any wealth. Dad didn't share as much wealth as he should have been when the parents got divorced. And so we'd go to Ross, right? Ross was like our place, man.
Oh yeah.
We would rock Ross, and we would, search for deals. And if we wanted to find something that was, it could be quality, but we had to hack it, right? We had to hack, we had to search, you had to grind through the Ross racks, right? And like, oh, okay, there's something off about that. Like, it doesn't have, all the buttons, but grandma could probably fix that button and put one on there, right? So the point is humility, right? Being willing to do what others aren't willing to do in order to get that base and that foundation, right? We forget sometimes Yeah, that's how America started. I mean, we basically hacked away from, from Great Britain, right? And we had to figure out ways to be gritty and to be resilient. And this wealth wasn't given to us. People had to start something in an industry and take risks. So what are your thoughts on that, Lucas?
Oh yeah. I personally still shop at Goodwill. It's actually really funny. Goodwills, you can tell the culture of a city or a neighborhood or a town based off the Goodwills. So if you go to the higher end Goodwills, you can actually get like some super cool stuff. You can get like a desktop. You can get like one of my favorites is I go to some of the, like back when I lived in Phoenix, I used to go to the Scottsdale Goodwills, and you get like this $1,000 desk for like $80. And you're like, that's a $1,000 desk for $80. And it's wood. So you don't even run into any trouble. So you're like, yeah. So I still shop at Goodwill. And that's like the one thing that you're talking about. It's once you learn the basics, no matter how much wealth you have, you should always maintain the basics, because otherwise you'll start using the income that should be going towards building more income, and you'll start using it for lifestyle choices. And then you're like, oh, wow. Now I have to go back to the old lifestyle because I overshot on my new lifestyle. So you got to be careful with trying to follow the Joneses. So
yeah, no, 100%. And we still shop at Ross, right? I mean, you know what I mean? But at the time, you're young, that was the only choice. And then, but we still do the same thing. I haven't done the Goodwill hack for a while. That's a good point. I almost forgot it was around, so I got to go back to the nicer Goodwills and see what the opportunities are. Well, very cool. So you're going to grow these 3 pillars of wealth, and you're going to start growing, and getting those foundations going. So, what are the biggest common, pitfalls that, people get hurt and really have to jump back or, go backwards, like and also in the context of what we're seeing right now with cryptocurrency, it crashed, drastically in the last 4 or 5 months. And then you have real estate that's starting to shift, right? And the stock market's also kind of, taking a dip here. So kind of give us the context of some things to the pitfalls to be careful when it's more of a preservation type of mode.
Yeah. So back when I was in college, I read this book, and it's funny because the investment world and the financial planner world, they've lost a lot of the basic glossary terms that I still miss, because I love them. Like one of them, speculation versus investment. They're completely separate and different things. But the problem is they've become almost interchangeable. And that's what it really annoys me, because they're like, oh, well, crypto's an investment. No, crypto's a speculation. And once you have those definitions defined, it's better for everybody, because then it's like, because speculation just by its sheer sounding doesn't sound very solid. Investment it's a strong, solid word. Speculation doesn't, like, it's not just based off the semantics of it. So, so a lot of the words that I miss now, which is very cognizant to what you're saying, is number one is going to be divesting, which is the reverse of investing. Right now, people are divesting out of their portfolios. They're seeing what their losses are. They're checking out, because every year you should always calculate what your taxes are going to be, because you're pretty much going to know what your taxes are going to be at the beginning of every year. Because once you understand what your income is on average every year, you should be able to just take it to your tax bracket and say, okay, this is how much my taxes I'm going to pay this year. So if you're going to divest, you need to calculate, okay, if my taxes are X, I'm going to make this many losses to then I can maximize the tax deductions if you itemize at the end of the year. And that's pretty much what a lot of people are doing right now, is you have to divest. And what I'm doing, actually, because the markets are shifting, divesting is very important. And then the other one is retrenchment or retrenching. That is when you realize you've made poor decisions and you have to divest. And therefore, you're going to start getting into a holding period, which is right now, a lot of my investors were all in holding periods where we don't know where the markets are going. We don't know what crypto is going to do. We don't know what stocks are going to do. We don't know what real estate's going to do. Everything is shifting. Some markets are still going up because they're still quote unquote affordable. And then some markets are falling apart. Like I lived in Phoenix for 10 years, and Phoenix is like the bellwether of America's real estate, because whatever's happening in Phoenix is like an extreme version of what's happening everywhere else. And Phoenix, all the prices quadrupled in like 2 years. And now they had like almost a 30%, like they're having 25% drops in prices and everything, all within 2 years. So it's like whipsawing. So Phoenix scares me. Like if anyone's buying in Phoenix, anyone who's doing Arizona investing right now in real estate, they're all like, wow, I remember when that thing was worth 400,000 and now it's only worth 300,000 all within a 6-month period. How fun. So those are pretty much going to be my terms. Speculation, investment, divesting, and retrenchment. And we're in a divest or retrench market. And like I said, there's a lot of opportunities. I'm obviously, my basic building block has always been the rental, and I'm a landlord for a living. And as these markets are coming down, even with the interest rates as high as they're getting, it's still one of those, oh, good, it's a good buy time, like sell when it's high, buy when it's low. So right now I'm looking at different real estate markets all over the US, and I'm figuring out, okay, which ones are still good rental markets, because I still need to park my money somewhere. And, so you need to be in a reconnaissance move. You got to be in a reconnaissance, a holding reconnaissance period right now, where it's like, divest your losses, because there's certain things that aren't going to come back, so just divest, retrench, figure out where your next market to put your money is. And that's pretty much where we're at right now.
Excellent. What a great overview, Lucas. That's so great. By the way, you can find more about Lucas at rhmreal.com. That's rhmreal.com. We're talking about growing 3 pillars of wealth and having strategies for, have a strategy, have a plan, have a team to help you execute these changing times. I love the way you put divesting, retrenching, take your losses when you should, and the difference between speculation and investment. You also talked about timing though, right? And trading properties and maybe selling high, buying low, which kind of leads into the part of the show where we talk about capital gains tax solutions, right? And sometimes these 1031 exchanges can be your best friend. They can be amazing, but other times they can be frustrating. So I'm curious, what do you find the biggest frustration is when it comes to the 1031 exchange, Lucas, and trading properties in a marketplace where you're selling high, but then you're not necessarily being able to buy low because it's just it's hard to find deals?
Oh, I've always had issues with the 1031 because it's such a strict, the guidelines are so strict on them. And even if you pick them, if you pick like the perfect 3 properties, let's just say something like, deals, real estate deals explode every day. Like you can literally pick the perfect 3 and then have all 3 of those blow up. And then you're like, oh, well, what do I do now? I actually had a guy, that's what happened to him. He ended up going into heart surgery and he missed his 1031 exchange timelines and he was just out of luck. He had to pay all the taxes because all the properties he wanted to buy had been bought, sold, purchased, or closed out, or they didn't want to sell anymore. And he ended up he had to close out and pay the taxes. So the biggest problem with 1031s, and plus it's an equivalent exchange. So it's like, well, I have to exchange, so you have to do the appraisals and then you got to figure out, okay, is this equivalent exchange? Do you have the money for the boot? And if you don't have money for the boot, then you got your own problems with those. So that's why you really just need to, like I was talking about before, you got to retrench and divest and figure out, well, is this 1031 the best thing I can do right now? Or because if there's enough losses and you don't have any profit on the unit, then, you don't have to do a 1031 exchange at all anyway, because you've already had losses. So you just got to be careful. So I think the biggest frustrations is just the strict guidelines. And then with the market changing so heavily, it's like, I mean, what if you thought what it's worth isn't actually what your property's worth, because if it doesn't appraise, next thing you know, because I had these issues when I was in, because now that we're talking about it, my biggest frustration is appraisers. I was trying to do a few cash out refinances and the appraisers kept lowballing me. And because I kept lowballing me, I couldn't get deals cut because they think it's only worth X and it's obviously worth Y. And you can literally get 3 or 4 out there. And, it's always a gamble on appraisers. So that's probably another really big frustration because the appraisers they're trying to figure out what the prices are just as much as anyone else, So, and like I've actually had a few issues with my cash out refinances right now because the appraisers are like, well, if the market's tanking, then we can't appraise for what it was. Like, because for example, the Federal Reserve started raising the interest rates in April. And there's now a fine line where, well, all the prices made sense pre-April. And now nothing makes sense post-April. And that's why you're seeing these giant swings in purchase prices, and the appraisers are catching wind of that. And now, so my biggest frustration right now would probably be appraisers, because because people don't realize there's such a hard line in the sand ever since they did the interest rate increase. It's like a hard line now, because I was actually selling a house in Phoenix, and pre interest rate increase, the place was worth like $450. Post rate increase, we had to sell it for $75,000 discount because we just couldn't get, the demand was gone. So that was probably my biggest.
Got it. And on the 1031 front, we call that the shotgun wedding, right? Where you got to get engaged in 45 days, you got to get married in 180, and you still high and buy higher, and it can be really frustrating, right? And in fact, we saw friends, family, and clients lose half or everything in the 2008 crash over a 3-year period here in Sacramento, California. And that's why we're really passionate, and we start capital gains tax solutions to give people an ability to eliminate the 1031 exchange, and in fact, divest without having to suffer the tax consequences, using something called a deferred sales trust, and then be able to invest strategically at optimal timing, dollar cost averaging into paper assets, right? And back into real estate of their own, or with partners, or starting another business. And so it kind of becomes this like 401k or IRA, if you will, as you exit these assets. It could be crypto, businesses, real estate. And then you defer all the tax, and then you can turn around and you can invest it back into deals, but at optimal timing. That's the cool thing. There's no 45, 180, there's no equal greater value. Based on IRC 433, which is an installment sale, but we coupled that with a trust. And that's the magic of how this thing works. And then we execute it for clients. And we've done $5 million Bitcoin sales, we've done $8 million primary home sales, $13 million car wash sales, multifamily complexes, dentists, optometrists, you name it. It works, and it's amazing. If you want to learn more about that, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. That's capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. But Lucas, we're running out of time. Are you ready for the lightning round?
Sure.
All right. Knowing what you know now, go back to your 20-year-old self with one golden nugget to tell yourself to do.
Oh man, that's a hard one. I would tell myself, I would have told myself to get into real estate earlier. Buy more, because then, you know how money is. It's like the earlier you get in, the more time you have to build wealth. So I would probably tell myself, hey, start these processes now, because I have a lot of clients, they're in their 30s and 40s. And the problem is they think they're just going to get they think they can get the time back. They want to buy, like I said, they're in their 40s and they're like, I want to bypass tier 1 and 2. And it's like, hey man, it doesn't work that way. It takes 10, 20, 30 years to build the wealth. And unless you have you just happen to be a really good job that allows you to bypass some of those, or you have a windfall. Like one of my favorite financial planning's topics are windfalls, because I love it when people just get a big pile of money and they're like, well, how do I turn this into income to achieve FIRE? And I'm like, oh, good. You're my ideal client. Let me give me that lottery ticket. Give me that inheritance, and we will figure out how to convert it into monthly cash flow, so you don't have to work as hard.
Absolutely love it. Absolutely, I love it. Second question: what's the one book you've recommended or gifted the most in the past year?
Oh, I always recommend. It's an oldie but a goodie. It's How Not to Be Intimidated by Robert Ringer. So that guy was if you don't know who Robert Ringer is, he was a commercial real estate agent in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, back when it was like the Wild West. And it's probably one of the greatest books. I read it when I was in college, or actually it was before I became a real estate agent. And it pretty much gives you all these concepts of how to be successful in real estate or in life. Like one of them is the positive attitude based on negative results. Probably one of my favorite things about sales is everyone's like, oh man, why don't you get emotional? You had like 3 deals blow up today. And I'm like, oh no, that happens. Like, I just hope they blow up gloriously, it's just like fireworks. But yeah, that's like one of I love that book, because like I said, you just have to have a positive attitude, because it's a numbers game, right? You're going to 75% of your deals are going to explode. The other 25% is where you make all your money. and you'll make a lot of money on that 25%. Might even be lower depending on your business.
Amazing, Lucas. Hey, this has been more than a pleasure. We are out of time. I want to thank you for being on the show, sharing your wisdom and sharing your stories and everything with us. This is so cool. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you, can you remind them one last time, what's the best place to find you?
Oh, you can check me out on my website, which is www.rhmreal, which is like realestate.com. So rhmreal.com. Has all my social media, my emails, my phone number. Pretty much get on there, and you can get a hold of me, and we can talk about all the different pillars of wealth.
Amazing. Thanks, Lucas. I also want to thank our listeners for listening for an episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. We so appreciate you spending some time with us. And we encourage you to have a plan, right? Have a plan to exit, something that's highly appreciated. Have a plan to have a planner like Lucas Thomas to help you invest the funds, hire the who, don't be the how, right? And allow people to guide and help you to create and preserve more wealth. Hey, if we can help you at all with exiting capital gains tax deferred in a way that's transformational, that doesn't require the 1031 exchange. It can be crypto, a business, real estate. We want to encourage you to go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. You can start your deferred sales trust exit plan. We also have our mastermind every Friday at 10 a.m. No cost, no obligation. Show up, hang out with us, and then check out the new book, Building a Tax Deferred Exit Strategy, coming out with Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank and a bunch of other really smart people by going to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Thank you so much.